With June coming to a close, we're halfway through the year, so what better time to comb back through all the shoes that have released from this year and pick out the best 5. Now, I do have a few other top 5 videos out from this year already. You got the top 5 lightest and the top 5 budget friendly, but if you're looking for the best shoe to play in from 2023, you're in the right place. I played in 27 different shoes this year, but only 5 were able to make the cut. Let's take a look. Getting us started, and the first shoe to make the list at number 5 is the Jordan 37, but specifically the low variation. I know the original Jordan 37s came out last year, but the low tops released early on this year. I want to say sometime like late January, maybe early February. And after not being a huge fan of the original Jordan 37s, which I want to say retailed for $185, I was actually a pretty big fan of how the Jordan 37 lows played. And, you know, they knocked off $10 too to make these $175. So I'll take that. But this is going to be the second most expensive shoe on this list, just for reference. But giving you a quick rundown on the Jordan 37 low. First, I mean, if you played in the Jordan 36, these are going to be similar in some ways. But full disclosure, I did like the Jordan 36 a little bit more, just all the way around, even the design, but the low version isn't going to be bad. I mean, the Jordan 37 originals kind of looked a little bit like a boot to me, but we'll just go ahead and get straight into the performance side. We'll start off with the cushion. So that's probably going to be the highlight of this model specifically, or at least it's going to be my favorite part. Like the actual tech specs, you're using some double stacked air in the forefoot. That's meant to give you some energy returning responsiveness, letting you stop, start on a dime, stuff like that. Then you're also going to have some Formula 23, and that's just Jordan's signature foam, and that's going to be stacked thick in the heel so you can come down as hard as necessary without having to deal with those aftershocks, and then also be able to bounce right back up. But that's basically what's being used on the inside, kind of how Nike or Jordan lays it out there for you. And this is one of those models that you're going to get a noticeable boost in the forefoot. Like it's going to be springy, but the overall feel, you like just the surrounding padding, like I said, just doesn't quite match up with the Jordan 36 from last year. It was just a little bit more plush, but cushion's still going to be a major positive. Using our durometer to check out the midsole, these were reading at a 40.5. That's going to be a little bit more firm than average, but that's just a tool that we use to test out how soft the shoe is in that spot. It's not always going to like translate to how the performance is, but now we'll move on to the materials and the support. That's one of the major changes to this year's model. Like the upper is going to be noticeably more thin. I thought it was pretty cool though, how the Jordan 37 low is designed to mimic the support given by a taped up ankle. That's just like a side piece, but you're using some lino weave material that's on this upper, and that shows up on a few different shoe lines. It's definitely going to be thin, but it is also light. And with this being a low top, that does help keep the Jordan 37 low on the lighter side, weighing 410 grams for a size 10.5. You have to like that, but I mean, support, that's a spot that just wasn't all that great on the original model. I can't lie though, the lows do feel a little bit more sturdy. Like to me, it just felt like you were asking the original 37s to do a little bit too much with just not a ton of reinforcement or like overlays to go along with it. Low top shoes, they just don't use quite as much material. Plus there weren't like really any additional support features on the first model, but you can see the laces actually feed through these white flaps near the toe area. That creates a little extra resistance to help. But now we'll go ahead and move on to the last thing to cover, and that's going to be the traction. And I did kind of save the most, average part of this model for last. The killer grip on the Jordan 36, that doesn't quite show up on the 37 as much. I just wasn't quite as impressed this year, but it's still not going to be bad. They did fall off, but I mean, we found out doing our squeak test that this just isn't the most sticky model, and it doesn't make a ton of noise on the court. But the outsole is very durable, really nice outdoor model. Probably a little bit nicer than what you would need to be using out there, but it will work. And then to finish off with sizing, they do run a little bit narrow for the length, but I mean, the width is going to be, or they run a little bit narrow for the width, but the length is going to be perfect. For wide footers, you may be able to get away with, going a half size up, but even just taking a step back, the Jordan 37 low was still able to find a way onto this list, even after having a little bit of a drop off from 36 last year. And that comes mostly from a combo of the first 3 things that we covered, between the cushion, the weight, and the support. Traction is just more so along for the ride, but still a solid shoe to hoop in, which lands him a spot at number 5. Coming in as the 4th best performance model of the year so far is the Jordan Why Not 06. This was a surprise appearance on the list this year. For those who don't know, this is part of Russell Westbrook's signature line with Jordan Brand. The Why Not part of the model name is like kind of tied to Russ's hard work and determination to seemingly defy the odds, because why not? But this was another shoe that released, on the earlier side of the year. I want to say it was sometime in February, I believe. And the retail price is going to be set for $140. Pretty average, but not bad for Jordan Brand, especially when you consider he's already on his 6th model. And they had been on pretty much like a wash, rinse, repeat, just whenever it came to like the design or like the look to Russ's shoes. I want to say the 2s all the way up to the 5s. Just made some minor changes, but nothing like they did this year's model. Like I'm talking mostly about the zipper, like that's one of the major changes, but you are still gonna have the traditional laces running underneath. That's just gonna be covered by an extra layer that can zip up. It's got a little bit of that Gary the Glove Payton-esque. More recently, you probably saw it on like the PG4s, but those had more of a straight on zipper setup. Either way, I loved it, and I thought it was a nice change that was definitely due to the shoe line. But that's not why they made the list. I mean, after being stuck in a little bit of mediocrity, the Jordan Why Not 06 plays really well this year. So we'll start off with the cushioning, and the setup is going to be a large volume 4-foot Zoom Air unit. That's going to be in each shoe to kind of help you return your energy and generate explosive bursts and speed. But that is similar to what his other shoes had been using. They just play a little bit better this year. Like the second I slid these on, I knew some minor improvements were made. Like the 4-foot had a little bit more bounce than what I was used to. And I only say minor improvements, and that's because Russ's line just really hasn't struggled with cushion. Like that's been one of the main highlights. It's been the other areas that kind of tend to lack, so it didn't need to get that much better. It just did. But using our durometer to check out the midsole, these were reading at 34.5, and that's going to be on the softer side, which does kind of line up with what you'd expect. So we'll go ahead and move on to the materials and the support. And after the same type of cushioning setup, even though it played a little bit different, this is going to be where most of the changes come in. The upper is going to be made out of synthetic leather and this air ripstop for a sturdy build that won't slow you down. And it felt like early on in his shoe line, a lot of those Why Not models tended to be pretty heavy. But like after dropping the weight down a ton last year, the Why Not 06 is still on the lighter side, weighing 416 grams for a size 10.5. And the support features like show up on this model. That's definitely one of the highlights too. That might be the strongest part of this shoe because you can see through the upper a little bit since it's semi-transparent. The laces are going to be feeding through those midfoot straps to help lock you all the way in as long as you keep your shoes tied up tight. And then you're also going to have a midfoot plate that runs through the shoe for some added stability. But to top it off, of course, you're going to have the zipper. Like I was saying, this is just like support's just one of the better parts to this model. No movement or anything like that. So now we'll go ahead and wrap it up with the traction. To be honest, this has kind of been the thorn in the side of Westbrook models. Like over the past few shoes, I almost feel like they did it to themselves by having like a rice grain pattern or something like that. That's not the most conducive to getting a consistent traction feel. But an all new setup this year, well, I guess not all new, but the lime green or the yellow, that's going to give us some arrows, just like more of an organized pattern in there. And then the orange is going to be more rice-a-roni. But the Why Not 6 is still going to beat the odds and just has much better bite on the floor this year. I mean, they also don't pick up dust quite as fast. That's always going to be a plus. And they do play a little bit louder. Our squeak test definitely made some noise on the court, way more than the 5s were anyway. So that's going to check out. And to finish off with sizing, the length and the width is going to be pretty standard. So honestly, I would just stick true to your size on this model. But overall, there's a lot to like or maybe even love about this new Westbrook shoe. I spent the whole last year harping on how his budget-friendly, like that Jordan 1 Take 4 model, was outplaying his main line. Well, not anymore. I'm all in on this Why Not 06, which helped earn them a spot at number 4. The next shoe to make the list, acting as our halfway point, is the Li-Ning Wave Weight 10, but just like the first shoe, it's going to be the low variation because I know the originals dropped last year, but the Wave Weight 10 lows didn't officially release until early February, just like every other shoe so far. But don't worry, we do have some more recent models on deck for this list, but this is hands down the most expensive shoe to make the list, retailing for $199 because $200 would have been a little bit ridiculous. Now, I mean, if you're familiar with Li-Ning and Wave Weight, you know that they kind of hit the full range whenever it comes to how much their shoes cost. Some go for $100. Some go for more than double that. Like the original Wave Weight 10s are $225 or something, so it could be worse. Not great for the bank account, but that being said, they are pretty great whenever it comes to the court. And to be transparent, like I didn't actually get the chance to play in the original 10s, but it's going to have the same features pretty much used and kind of translate down to this model. So they're just going to run a little bit lower. But I will say Wave Weight has just been known for having some of the nicer looking or even just some of the higher quality looking basketball shoes out there, in my opinion. Like I've played with some pretty sweet designs from them. None of them sweeter than this Wave Weight 10 model though. This is going to be the Valentine's theme colorway, so you will have some cool features. Like you have a little Cupid's arrow on the right or on the side of the upper. And then you're also going to have like on the heel, you have a heart back there. And then there's some text on the tongue that says romance never dies. So there's just a lot of cool features, but we'll skip all that. We'll get straight to the performance breakdown and we'll start off with the cushion. So Wave Weight 10 Low is going to be using a boom setup with a full length carbon fiber plate to help energize you step by step. And that boom technology is actually going to be specific to Wave Weight. It's a P-back based foam that's supposed to be similar in feel to Boost, just not quite as soft. But from the jump, you can tell this is just going to be an overall like comfortable shoe to play in. The cushion's hitting you from underfoot, and the sock liner is going to be plush too, but Now, I will say the wave weight 10s did take a little bit more breaking time for me, but it feels like, the more that I've continued to play with them, they have been loosening up. And then here's even a pretty sweet little diagram that kind of gives you of just a visual representation of what the tech specs are like being used. It's no wonder they have that high of a retail price whenever you're putting, all of that stuff into this model. But cushion is definitely going to be a strong point. And using our durometer reading, that came back at a 47.5, which is a little bit firm, but that's more for science. As you can see, that doesn't actually translate to how they play. But now we'll go ahead and touch on the materials and the support. That's probably going to be the bread and butter for this shoe. Like I said, Way of Wade, as far as like the models that I've gotten in and played in, they all tend to be just high quality and they feel sturdy. And this is a shoe that's going to headline that theme. Like the bulk of the upper is going to be made out of a breathable mesh that's stitched to like allow for great airflow. And the mesh is prone to help keeping a shoe lightweight. And this is actually the lightest Way of Wade model that I've played in to date, weighing 398 grams for a size 10.5. So whenever that happens, though, you do kind of have to take a closer look at the support number whenever it's going to be that low, but I kind of gave it away already. Support's going to be excellent on the 10 lows. So I'll go ahead and bring you back to that picture just to kind of help play it out. The main things to focus on here would be like the TPU stabilizer to help with it. And then you also have like the ankle support piece on top of that, torsion plank, toe cap. All right. No, I'm not going to lie. Now we're starting to get into the model construction a little bit, but all you really need to know is support is a non-factor in a good way. These feel great and you just don't have to have any heel slippage or movement. The whole model just feels sturdy, like I was saying. But that brings us to traction. And these are going to be using a rubber outsole with this kind of cool water ripple pattern, but I'm gonna say this is this is probably the loudest shoe that I've ever played in. Like during our squeak test, I thought it was gonna bust my eardrums. Like this is just a super loud model, and normally that means you're set up really good whenever it comes to grip, and you are, but traction is a piece like on the Wave Weight 10 low where they're gonna collect some dust, and that's about the only thing that could alter like your playing experience. It's gonna be, I only bring that up because specifically I feel like this shoe catches a little more dust than the other ones, because aside from that, one quick swipe and that sticky feel should just come straight back. But now we'll finish off with sizing, and the length is going to check out again. It's going to be about a thumb's width left over, but they do run narrow. Nothing too crazy, but it's something to keep in mind. But I want to say I probably played in 5 or 6 shoes from Way of Wade now. Most of the shoes have been really nice. This has been the best one whenever it comes to performance alone. It's a really well-rounded model, amazing everywhere besides, probably the retail price. But that's going to be what helps earn them a spot as the 3rd best shoe to hoop in of the year so far. The runner-up coming in as my 2nd favorite performance shoe from 2023 so far is the newly released Nike Ja 1. I tried to give it some time before putting these on. There was some controversy out there surrounding, the other colorways, if they were going to actually drop. I didn't want to put a shoe on here that you wouldn't have access to if you hadn't bought them already, but I think that we're out of that now, so enter the Nike Ja 1. Making this list with your first signature shoe does kind of show that you're off to a great start, and this is actually going to be the cheapest shoe on this list today, retailing for the low price of $110. That's actually the new cheapest shoe line in Nike now. They're right along there with Paul George, I think at 110. So the design is really sick on these two. They do a lot of comparisons to like Kobe models whenever they were first coming out, especially with that Ja Morant logo that they're using on the tongue. I don't know. You can be the judge on that. It's definitely close, but I personally like that green Nike swoosh. It never actually rounds off. It just kind of wraps around to the back and connects on the inner side of the shoe. So I thought that was a cool touch. Chase even thought like the filled in spot on the upper makes it look like a Tiger Woods model, somewhat like a cleat right there. And I can kind of see that a little bit, but they're not on here for that. They're on here for performance. So now let's go ahead and get to breaking that down. And we'll of course start off with the cushioning. So that's arguably going to be the best, or just like my favorite part about this shoe. The Ja 1 uses a 4-foot Zoom Air unit that's supposed to help you gain vertical acceleration. Then you're also going to have a plush cushioning kind of meant to provide comfort whenever you're coming back down to earth after skying through the clouds. And it's perfect that Nike lays it out that way, because me and Ja are kind of known for spending way too much time, being airborne. But on a serious note, the padding is just going to be great everywhere on this shoe. Like you're going to have plenty of cushioning under your foot. And, with this being more of a low profile type feel, you're definitely going to be grounded on this model. But I'm a fan of that. I kind of like how that plays. But using our durometer to check out the midsole, these were reading at a 36.5. That's going to fall like slightly softer than the average range. But like I said, cushion is going to be one of the highlights. So now we'll just go ahead and move on to the materials and support. And though the upper is going to be like having some holes poking through, and that's going to allow for better airflow. That does help keep the shoe on the much lighter side, only weighing 390 grams even for a size 10.5. And that's like the second lightest shoe on this list, but it's one of the lighter models of the year. I did just drop a top 5 lightest shoes from 2023 so far, and the Ja 1 did barely crack that list at number 5. But I mean, the weight is going to be a major highlight, especially since the support is also going to check out too. Like the heel structure feels like it molds around your foot, so you just aren't sliding around. And I referenced it a little bit earlier, but I mean, that filled in portion in the middle of the shoe does represent some midfoot bands that are going to be there to just make you feel even more locked in. The Ja 1 is reinforced really well, so now we'll just go ahead and wrap it up with the traction. The pattern's going to be a little bit random, but I mean, one thing I will say about the Ja 1 is that it's going to have potential in both ways. It's going to be really solid or a little bit iffy. And I personally have spent most of my time playing in these when they're on the solid side. The only time they really struggle is more so when they get dirty, but I mean, it's not the worst dust collector. It's just another shoe that's, you know, going to have that issue kind of come along with it. But they did make a bunch of noise while we were doing our squeak test. That kind of, you know, highlights the potential that they have. But traction is not going to be the best part about this shoe. It's still going to be far from a weak spot. And then finishing off with sizing, these are pretty standard, but not quite as narrow as the Wade 10s. Like I mean, they do lean a little bit on the narrow side, but the length is going to be perfect. You've got about a thumb's worth left over. So, I mean, we do have a new model here. Ja kicking off his new shoe line with Nike. You kind of never know what you're going to get sometimes, but with the Nike Ja 1, there isn't much, if anything, that I can really nitpick. That's why they're my second favorite performance shoe of the year so far. Topping the list as the best basketball shoe from 2023 so far is another new one, the Jordan Tatum 1. This is the newest shoe to make the list, I think. I know the Ja 1's released around the same time. I'm just not sure which one came first. But they show up 1-2 on this list, so I'm just glad they exist. And the retail price is not off to a bad start for a new line going for $120. We have a lot of new shoe lines getting started that I'm excited about. Like, I love to see how signature shoe lines kind of evolve. I picked up in the middle of, like, you know, the LeBron, KD, Steph shoe lines. But just in the last 2 years, we've gotten to see LaMelo, Luka, Tatum, Zion, Ja, Ant-Man, and even Austin Reeves is showing out signing shoe deals. So, I mean, this has kind of turned into a major sidetrack. I'll zero back into the Tatum 1s. I'm just excited about those two. But this is another shoe that I just really love the design of, but not everyone did. Like, there was some backlash on this whole, like, crown kind of side wing design. I don't know. I personally liked it. And this is a St. Louis colorway too. Got to show some love. I actually grew up a few hours away from Jason, so a few of my friends actually drove up to watch him play occasionally. But I mean, they do show some flashes of the city flag on the back right here. I thought that was a cool touch. Plus the whole color scheme kind of reps St. Louis anyway. So now we'll just give you a quick breakdown and you know exactly where we're starting. So let's get to it. The Jordan Tatum 1 is going to be using a Nike Zoom Air unit that's actually visible from the bottom of the shoe in red. They left it exposed on there so you can see it a little bit better. That is meant to help give you the ups that you're looking for without weighing you down. That's of course going to be according to Nike. But of all the shoes on this list, this has one of the better on-court feels whenever it comes to like just cushion alone, in my opinion. Like similar to the Why Not 6s and the Ja 1s, you're going to get a little bit of spring in the forefoot, but it's just more noticeable. And the Tatum 1, it almost kind of feels like you're just playing on a little air bubble or air pocket. Like it's just more front loaded than if some of those other setups, but you're not going to get that bouncy feel in the back, but at the same time, it's still going to feel plush. They did a good job not leaving that behind. And then our durometer reading came back at a 42. I was a little bit surprised at how high that was, but I mean, the foam does feel pretty stiff whenever you actually feel it, but to play on it, it is going to be much softer. But now I do want to look at the materials and the support, because the first thing that I noticed whenever I was taking this shoe out of the box is they felt like crazy light. And they are. A size 10.5 weighs 352 grams. That is the lightest shoe on this list. Nearly the lightest model of the year, to like on top of them performing this well. Like I was shocked by that. And I'm honestly just impressed at how good the surrounding padding is in the sock liner just running up the shoe, simply because the upper just feels so thin. But support could have easily become a concern if they left that category alone, but that didn't happen. You are going to have some help coming from that crown design, of course. That more so just like reinforces the side of the upper, just gives you an extra layer to keep your foot from trying to shift or like slide outside of the footbed. Clearly you don't want that. And then your ankle is going to stay locked in really well. Like these are somewhere between a mid and a low top shoe, but I didn't struggle with the support. And that's going to go ahead and lead us to the traction. The pattern is going to be like wavy in the front half of the shoe where that translucent spot is. It's a little bit of a different setup in the back, but of course you also have the exposed outsole. I think that looks sick, but does kind of eliminate some of the surface area that you could be using to get a better grip, I feel like. But traction is already off to a great start on this line. I haven't played in the Tatum ones more than, a handful of times. Kind of similar to the jaw ones, but the potential is going to be there, probably even a little bit more so than the jaw ones. Like, not as good for outdoor use though. I mean, the grooves aren't going to be that deep, and the outsole just doesn't seem like it's going to be the most durable. But finishing off with sizing, this is a spot where you actually might need to make an adjustment. The length, I mean, this is a shoe that does run a little bit long, but at the same time, it does run closer to narrow than it is wide. So if you plan on going a half size down, just make sure you think you're going to have the room to be able to get away with something like that. But I mean, personally, I just love to see the new additions and like new shoe lines that all made the list this year. There's still a ton of weeks left and plenty of shoes that I'll be waiting on to review to see if they can knock some of these ones off the tier. But as it stands, the Jordan Tatum 1 is the best shoe out there to play in from 2023 so far. Thank you guys for taking some time to watch. Feel free to throw us a follow or a sub if you like this video. And if you're interested in buying any of the shoes that we hit on today and you want to support our channel, just click the link here on screen, or we have links down below or in our bio. Feel free to check that out. But that wraps up this review. Until next time, I'm Landon from Shoewear. Peace.